You know you've done something unique when even after 7 years, people are still discussing a movie they supposedly hate more than the people that genuinely admire them. You know you've done something special when you live rent-free in the minds of those who are stuck so very far in the past or who are easily influenced by what they hear on social media or from a particular critic. And honestly, you've made something very memorable when movies like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman are mentioned more frequently than other superhero movies, even though those are the movies that are quote unquote supposedly better. What is interesting and most fascinating about Kal-El is not so much that he is heroic and has the uncanny abilities, but the fact that his character is as debated and discussed as heavily as he is. Among the legions upon legions of superheroes that exist in both Marvel and DC, Superman is probably the most discussed slash debated, and unfortunately the character most only want to see seemingly in one way. Hope and optimism mean different things to different individuals. The Google definition of hope is defined as being a feeling of expectation and a certain desire for certain things to happen. Again, hope means different things to different people. Smiling abundantly and being full of joy simply isn't realistic in today's world, today's cinema, and shouldn't be the lone standard for superhero movies, or any movie for that matter. Christopher Reeve never smiled throughout the entirety of his respective Superman movies, neither did Brandon Routh or Tom Welling on his TV series. Before you say, that's not what I mean when I say I want Superman to be more hopeful, well, what exactly do you mean? If Superman has too much action, he seemingly doesn't care, and there's too much destruction. If he looks the part, the movie or TV show he appears on is too boring. There's seemingly no way to win. Gatekeeping, nostalgia, and the success of the MCU has unfortunately been a blockade for Superman. Superman, again, is indeed a fascinating character. But what is perhaps even more fascinating is to see all these rules and takes by fans, which, ironically enough, are rules that don't seemingly exist at all for other comic book characters and how they are portrayed on screen. It's never, oh, it needs to be this way with Spider-Man, or, oh, Thor can be this way, or The Walking Dead needs to be this way. But with Superman, everyone is an expert, and no one is allowed to enjoy the character without nostalgic or otherwise biased objection. The irony in all this is that it exposes the mindset of those who say, quote, give him the red trunks, like comic writer Dan Slott, or those who always seemingly say, quote, that's not my Superman, end quote. The expectations don't stop there. Even with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman being the highest grossing movies with Superman in them, the expectation is suddenly that if Superman is, quote, more hopeful, and, quote, if he was more like Superman, that these movies would gross $1 billion, as if we all work for Warner Brothers. There are simply too many experts and too many individuals focused solely on one or two or three particular aspects in regards to Superman, particularly Henry Cavill's Superman and how he should be portrayed. It's really a blessing that Henry Cavill loves the character, is proud of what began with Man of Steel, and isn't seemingly bothered by the opinions of those who claim to be fans. Being a fan is fine. Having an opinion is also fine. But the past 7 years have been hell for some, no, quite a few, who bash and type vitriolic remarks about those who are fans of Superman movies like Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. It makes absolutely no sense. If the roles are reversed, and they have been, then suddenly those same individuals want to cry wolf and act as though they've done nothing wrong. Because at the end of the day, no one is wrong for having an opinion, and talking tough behind a keyboard these days is way too easy. The success of the more family-friendly MCU has also added to this. For every time we hear the MCU thrown into the conversation, it's always a discussion of, look at Captain America, worship Kevin Feige. There's a reason the MCU is more successful. The Superman movies needed more jokes. These takes are truly mind-blowing. No one is knocking and no one can deny the MCU's success. But what works for the MCU has been proven to not work for the DCEU, and copying another studio's formula isn't at all original, nor does it suit a character like Superman. Christopher Reeve's Superman served his purpose. We can't and shouldn't expect every superhero movie and every Superman to replicate what he did and have the traits that he had, because what worked back then will not necessarily translate as well in this present day. This will make the character of Superman one-dimensional and ultimately predictable. If someone is a fan of Henry Cavill, so be it. If someone is somehow a fan of Dean Cain, then so be it. And if someone is a fan of Brandon Routh, that too is fine. The truth is, when someone says he's not my Superman or this is not the Superman I know, we need to remember that characters must evolve and are open to different interpretations, and that ultimately, at the end of the day, these are just fictional characters. James Mangold was right back in 2018, and I don't blame Christopher McQuarrie for sticking to making badass Mission Impossible movies with Tom Cruise instead of a Henry Cavill Superman movie with those Green Lantern dudes. While it likely would have been a welcome successor and not necessarily a sequel, it's no secret that fans will let you have it on social media, and that sometimes, unfortunately, these studios will take the words of social media to heart in regards to these type of films. To test Superman's faith in humanity seemingly means he is, quote, too brooding, and to make him smile more, which is what people ask for more of, exposes the nature of critics who then say, why did the tone suddenly change? Superman of all characters can certainly become one with a more realistic take in terms of storytelling, and ironically, a lot of these same truths are and have been occurring in our present day. Every superhero movie shouldn't have to be lighthearted and fun all the time. Everyone isn't a kid, and even those that are kids, most know that there are good days and bad days. That's just life. So, you see, it's not just so simple as saying, copy this particular panel from All-Star Superman, or take inspiration from Superman Birthright, or make him more like the Superman from before. Look at the MCU formula, copy Captain America. This simply, these takes, these so-called solutions are not the answer. And by now, hopefully most are aware that just because a specific comic creator has written a successful run in the past or has ideas, that doesn't at all mean that he or she has the right ideas in terms of Superman on the big screen. It's not even as simple as getting another director. And with that being said, no director, or anybody for that matter, should be subjected to the cruelty that Zack Snyder has had to endure for making movies, regardless of if you like or dislike the movie. The only thing Zack Snyder did quote-unquote wrong with his Superman is make him human and relatable to those of us who have struggles, and ultimately inspire the people who genuinely enjoy these films to keep going. Because again, joy, happiness, and constant smiles is not realistic. I'll say that again. Joy, happiness, and constant smiling is not realistic. And Superman shouldn't be and isn't limited to one portrayal / adaptation. It is very frustrating, but truly isn't that much of a surprise that Warner Brothers is admittedly hesitant when it comes to another Superman movie. Though I have a feeling that may change after he returns in next year's Justice League, maybe even sooner. But what Superman has done, and what the fandom has shown, is that there are too many rules, regulations, requirements, and expectations when it comes to how he can be portrayed on screen. Superman ultimately exposed how often incorrect these individuals are, and how entitled and how much movie critics sadly have influence on a lot of these troubled individuals. Because if Superman makes $1 billion but doesn't get critical acclaim, or gets critical praise but doesn't make $1 billion, the blame is on the director, which was proven with both Superman Returns and Man of Steel. Or said Superman is a good Superman, but, quote, the writing lets him down, end quote, without an explanation as to why the writing lets him down. Or, quote, Superman needs J.J. Abrams to make a good Superman movie. Or, quote, Superman needs to be less destructive and interact with people more, even if the fate of the world is at stake, and that same complaint never exists in other superhero films. Or, we need a Marvel director or Shazam-like tone to make a, quote, proper, end quote, Superman movie. Or we need to look at the Rotten Tomato meter as to why Superman hasn't had a proper sequel until next year, that is. Or we must take into consideration that the death of Superman was supposedly too soon. But once again, this critique doesn't exist for any other superhero movie. And Superman would never allow this much destruction or kill a villain, although he's killed and flown by as destruction has ensued in comics, TV, and games more than once. Superman must only be like he was in 1978 to succeed. But no, I'm not saying Superman needs to be more like Reeve. I'm just saying he needs to be more cheerful, even as he's being tested by the unimaginable circumstances in the background. So, you see, eventually all these complaints, criticisms, rules, and commandments of how to make a superhero movie, a Superman movie, they just go to show that truthfully, there is never going to be a right or wrong answer to Superman. And ultimately, most critics are not experts in terms of comics, and are indeed biased when it comes to superhero movies that exist outside of the MCU. Because for every person that loves Henry Cavill as Superman and the movies he was in, there will certainly be someone with a list of reasons why you're wrong for liking him, even if the person that appreciates Henry Cavill as Superman debunks that reasoning. It's ironic. And maybe in the words of Steve Trevor, maybe we are all to blame. And in the words of Morgan Freeman, could it be that we are fighting a war that simply cannot be won? Superman is a character that is immediately and obviously on a gatekeeping leash, but hopefully in time this will change.